As the New York Giants open up their offseason program, they suddenly find themselves with a Dexter Lawrence dilemma on their hands.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. I am your host, Patricia Traina, and on this episode, the Giants begin their offseason program on Tuesday, but they're going to do it without one of their most important players on the roster, and that, of course, is defensive co-captain Dexter Lawrence, defensive lineman. All right, now, Dexter Lawrence, it came out on Monday, not happy with the Giants. They don't apparently want to play ball with regards to his contract. Dexter wants to be traded. So we're going to take a look today at how we got to this point. We're going to then take a look at why the Giants should and shouldn't pay Dexter Lawrence, do something with his contract. And then we'll explore if it's worth trading him. And actually, I've got a couple of trade offers from my Locked On colleagues. All right, a couple of them made me trade offers for Dexter Lawrence. And I'll play those for you, and I'll tell you what I think of them and how I think this whole thing with Dexter Lawrence is going to play out. So that's today's episode. Again, welcome to everybody. All right, so Dexter's not happy. And if I'm being totally honest with you, last year, you could see the frustration on Dexter's face. The personality was so different for Dexter Lawrence. Dexter's always been very kind of happy-go-lucky, jovial type. You know, you could go up to him, you could joke with him and, share a laugh and whatnot. And the season last year, which was a rough one for Dexter, both personally, in terms of his own performance and just with the team losing, it took its toll on him. And I think, between the losing, between Dexter not being fully healthy, between, the very slow start he got off to because he came into camp, I had heard, overweight and out of shape. I think, the whole thing with Carl Banks calling him out, which, is Carl's opinion. He's entitled to do that. I think all of that ate away at Dexter. That and plus, being a captain and people was questioning, hey, why aren't you talking to Abdul Carter when Abdul Carter was, not pulling his weight and doing what he was supposed to be. So that, and then you also throw in the fact that every time Dexter Lawrence was taken off the field, the team just, it was obvious. You could see that he was missing. It was like a black hole almost in terms of that defensive front. And then it got to the point where, were they pushing him to go out there or were they pulling it back or what exactly were they doing? So all of that added up to frustration for Dexter Lawrence. And at the end of last year, during Baggy Day, Dexter didn't talk to the media. But before that, Dexter had spoken to the media. You could tell the man was frustrated. All right, now we learned that to add to those frustrations, he was trying to get some guaranteed money and some financial security on his contract, which, as I've said before on the show, even though Dexter has 2 more years left on the 4-year extension he signed, he has no more guaranteed money. So if you've watched every day, you know that I have said that Dexter's contract is one that the Giants can redo, give him a little bit more money, give him, the guaranteed money, throw in a voidable year if you have to, and you can lower his cap hit for this year and open up a whole bunch of cap space to get you through the season. That has not happened. Now, I can only guess what is going on from the Giants' perspective. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to take a guess here, an educated guess. The Giants don't want to do a full-fledged renewal because they feel, okay, you know what? You got 2 years left. Let me see you bounce back from last year's off year, which, by the way, as I will get to a little later on in the show, even though some of the numbers were bad, it wasn't quite as bad as maybe we all think it was. So who knows? Maybe the Giants are like, okay, you know what, Dexter? You get back to being the guy that we saw in 2024 before the elbow injury, then we'll talk turkey. To which Dexter is probably saying, I am the same guy. I was hurt. I was this, that, and the other thing. Where's the love and the loyalty? I went out there. I busted my butt for you. And where's the loyalty? So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where the stalemate has come up. Now, there was also a report that the Giants were approached last year by teams looking to trade for Dexter Lawrence. And Joe Schoen was like, nope, not having it, which, you kind of expected. At the time, Dexter, was in a down year, but he wasn't horrible. It wasn't like he went right off the cliff. So all of that. And then you look at, maybe Dexter being out in Seattle cheering on Leonard Williams, his old running mate, and watching him go all the way to a Super Bowl. And you just wonder if all of that kind of came together in a perfect storm to where now Dexter is just not feeling it with the Giants. Even though, John Harbaugh has infused all kinds of energy and optimism, whatnot, Dexter's probably just not feeling it. He's been with the team since 2019. This one of two guys, Darius Slayton being the other, who have been with the team the longest. All right, so we have this whole situation now where everything's kind of working against Dexter Lawrence. That's probably why he wants out. It's like, if you're not going to give me financial security, which, again, who can blame him? Guy goes out there and, he wasn't himself last year, but again, part of that was his doing. Part of it was the previous coaching staff's doing, right? You might recall that I spoke about how I didn't understand why during training camp Dexter Lawrence's reps were limited, right? You saw him in the one-on-one drills. You saw him in the 7-on-7s. You didn't really see him a whole lot in the 11-on-11s. I questioned why that was. I'm like, why are they still babying him? Especially when at the Pro Bowl games, months before, he was partaking in tug of war, which to me told me that elbow maybe wasn't as bad of a problem as maybe the Giants thought it was. And then, you go through the season and you see that, Dexter's just not, the stamina's lacking a little bit. And he got better. Let's give him credit where it's due. He did get better as the year went on. But you just wonder about the whole handling of his situation and if that just kind of contributed to the perfect storm that he went through, which I think it did, by the way. So you have a frustrated Dexter Lawrence on your hands. But you know what, folks? You still have a pretty good player, despite the fact that his numbers last year went downhill. I had a laugh because, Andre Patterson, now the former defensive line coach, stood in front of the media when people questioned him about why Dexter's numbers had fallen off a cliff. And he says, oh, it's hard for, a guy to, an interior guy to do that, year in and year out. It's really not if you're healthy and you've got everything together. I don't buy that argument. I never did. You heard Patterson say, oh, Dexter's still drawing the double teams. Okay, yeah, he was. And I get that. Double teams are not easy to beat, but Dexter wasn't even beating the single teams on a regular basis. So you just kind of knew, your eyes were telling you that something wasn't right, whether it was stamina, whether it was the elbow, whatever the case may be. And, Dexter now has an opportunity that hopefully he's in tip-top shape, rejuvenated, and ready to go. It's just a question of where is he going to go? All right, Giant fans, coming up next, I asked my Locked On colleagues to make me an offer for Dexter Lawrence. And a couple of them came through with offers, and we'll talk about what they were for the trade. And I'll tell you whether I liked them and I didn't, or if I didn't like them. And we'll also take a look at what life without Dexter Lawrence might look like for the New York Giants. That's coming up right after this. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Financial stress is something that a lot of people are carrying right now. And it's not just about numbers. It can affect your sleep, your relationships, and your overall mental health in ways that build up over time. And the reality is that struggling with money doesn't mean that you fail. Sometimes it just means you haven't had the right kind of support. The stress that comes with trying to figure out on your own, the expectations you feel to have everything together, and how that pressure can spill into other areas of your life. Therapy isn't about financial advice. It's about working through the stress, the anxiety, and the emotions that come with it. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served, BetterHelp makes it easier to get matched and start focusing on what you need. When life feels overwhelming, therapy can help. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/locked on. That's better, HELP.com/locked on. All right, New York Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in America. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and this segment, Dexter Lawrence, man, I tell you, why can't the Giants ever go into an offseason without something just kind of hanging over them? And Dexter Lawrence, unfortunately, is that something this year. Dexter not happy with how his contract talks have gone with the Giants, even though he's got 2 years left on a deal. Supposedly he wants out. He's not going to be at the offseason conditioning program, which, by the way, is voluntary. Just a mess. And we haven't even started yet as I record this. So what we're going to do in this segment, we're going to take a look at what would the Giants be missing if Dexter Lawrence was not there. Then I've got a couple of trade offers that were made to me by my fellow Locked On colleagues. All right. I got one from the Saints and I got one from the Chargers. So I will play those videos for you and I will give you my input as to whether or not I would even be tempted to take those offers. All right. So that's what we got in this segment. All right. Let's get into it. Dexter Lawrence, look, I get it. Last year, he didn't have the greatest year. But you know what? It was one of those instances where you can probably say that Dexter Lawrence's off year was probably better than a lot of guys who had on years, if you will. So what do I mean by that? Well, Dexter Lawrence, when he was not on the field, according to True Media, when Dexter Lawrence was not on the field, opponents averaged 6.7 yards per play against the Giants. When Dex was on the field, that dropped to 5.2 yards per play. All right, so that's quite a difference. Not, the on the field 5.2 yards, not great, but compared to 6.7 yards when he was off, it's better. Dexter, over the last 3 years, amongst nose tackles, by far the highest amount of quarterback pressures, over 100, 103 to be exact. And it wasn't even close. Dexter, according to Pro Football Focus, again, out of 127 defensive linemen, interior defensive linemen, his pass rush win rate was 6th in 2025, the so-called down year. So, no, Dexter didn't have like a lot of sacks. He only had a half a sack. And yes, there were times throughout the year that Dexter just looked like, just another guy. But he was still better than a lot of guys out there. And the proof's in the pudding. Every time Dexter came off the field, opponents went right to his spot with success, I might add. So, yeah, Dexter had an off year. You know what? It happens. Was he healthy? Was he not healthy? I mean, who knows? He only knows for sure. But that being said, that's where we're at. And maybe the Giants are like, okay, you know what? You're coming off of a bad year. We need to see you more motivated. We need to see you get into camp in shape and ready to roll. Maybe that's what's behind all this. I don't know. But what I do know is Dexter Lawrence is very valuable to this Giants defense because look, the depth that they have at the defensive line spot, it's not very good. It's not very good at all. And quite honestly, who are you going to find out there, whether it be in the draft or what's left in free agency, that's equal to or better than Dexter? You're not going to. All right. So that being said, I mentioned that I went to my Locked On NFL colleagues and I said to them, okay, guys, just for fun, make me an offer. Make an offer on behalf of your team for Dexter Lawrence. Shoot a little video, send it over to me, and I'll run it on the show. And I got 2 offers. I got one from Locked On Saints and one from Locked On Chargers. Let's hear what Ross Jackson, my guy Ross, had to say from Locked On Saints.
Hey, Patricia, I have a trade offer for you from Locked On Saints regarding Sexy Dexy. And while 2 first-round picks might be the starting asking price, I think that might be a little bit too rich for New Orleans. But how about this? How about Alvin Kamara, this year's 3rd-round pick, which is 73rd overall, and next year's 2nd-round pick as a starting point for these conversations? I don't know that Alvin Kamara is long for New Orleans. I think he'd like to get an opportunity to go somewhere. There's a lot of young, exciting stuff happening over with the New York Giants. I think he could be an interesting addition, maybe spice up some of the conversation in that backfield next to Jackson Dart. Let me know. Alvin Kamara, this year's 3rd, 73rd overall, and a 2nd from next year for Dexter Lawrence. Give me a call.
All right, Ross, I love you. And I'll give you a call about anything except that trade offer. I mean, all right, look. Alvin Kamara is 31 years old. He's in the final year of his contract. He's got voidable years after that. No. I mean, he might still have something left in the tank, but if I'm the Giants and I want a running back, I'm going faster with Jeremiah Love at number 5, which I don't think, by the way, is going to be the way the Giants go, than I am taking on Alvin Kamara. I'm just not doing that. And to not have a number 1 pick thrown in that offer, I mean, why not just offer the Saints' first round pick, which I think is number 9, if I'm not mistaken. All right. Why not offer that? You know, Dexter Lawrence, I think he's still good enough to draw a first round pick. So you're giving me a 31-year-old running back who's at, the last year of his contract and a 3rd round pick. No. Love you, Ross, but I'm not calling you back on that one. Sorry. All right. This next one came in from the guys over at Locked On Chargers. Let's hear what their offer for Dexter Lawrence was.
What's going on, Giants fans? This is David Drogemeyer of the Locked On Chargers podcast, and I heard Dexter Lawrence may be available, maybe on the trade block. Seems like he wants out. He seems like he wants a new contract, one that he's been seeking for quite a long time, and I think the Chargers are in prime position to proposition for a deal. They don't have a lot of picks in the 2026 NFL draft. They only have 5, but I think this is a deal that the Chargers can make happen. I think if they offer their 22 overall in this year's draft, the first round pick, and include a 3rd round pick in 2027, that seems like a deal that could get done. There were reports that came out that said they were looking for a late 1st round pick. So I think that is an enticing enough offer. The Chargers have $48 million in cap space, so they can accommodate his contract. They can definitely use him. He is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. I know he had a little bit of an off year last year, but he is just one season removed from racking up 9 sacks. He is a dominant interior presence, and he's the type of player that makes everybody around him better, and the Chargers absolutely need that. They haven't had a dominant force like that since Jamal Williams. So I think that's the offer. I think that's good enough to get it done. You tell me, let me know.
All right. That was David Drogemeyer of Locked On Chargers, one half of the duo. Now, David's offer is interesting. They didn't include the 1st round pick. And he said a 3rd rounder in 2027. I don't know that that's enough. Maybe I'm being greedy here, but I don't think that's enough. The 1st round pick, all right, you know what? If I'm being honest with you guys, every draft analyst that I've had on this show has said the same thing. that there are probably about 13 or so prospects in this draft class with legitimate first round grades. Everybody else is just, second round and lower. But because you have 32 teams drafting, you're going to have 32 first round picks. So that means some of these second round picks are going to go in the first round. I don't know that the value is there. I really don't. If I'm the Giants and I'm contemplating making a trade with the Chargers, because, that would mean Dexter goes out of the NFC and certainly far away from the NFC East, I would probably want 2 first round picks this year and next year. And, the third rounder in 2027, not a horrible pick, but I don't know. I'd want more. I would want more. I would want 2 first round picks. If they can do it with 2 first round picks, then I think I would sell it. I would make the trade. But it doesn't sound like they want to go that high. So that being said, and it's interesting because after David sent me the video, he sent me a tweet. He goes, "Oh, looks like the price for Dexter's even come down further." Well, you know what? As much as I have probably been critical of Joe Shane for overvaluing players, in this case, I just think the offer that was made by the Chargers undervalues Dexter Lawrence. And you just don't make that trade. I mean, I'm sorry. Dexter is the type of guy. There's very few guys on the Giants that you can say would bring in a nice little package of picks. You can make an argument maybe for Kayvon Thibodeau. You can certainly make an argument for Brian Burns. You can definitely make an argument for Dexter Lawrence. I'm not giving those guys away, any of them. Burns is off the table, first of all. Thibodeau, I would consider moving. I just would not make that offer, that trade with the Chargers for Dexter. I just don't think there's enough there. But, look, kudos to Ross and to David for trying, for coming through, making an offer. I appreciate it. But let me know. Would you guys make any of those trades? I'd be curious to know. Drop a comment and let me know. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, how is this whole thing going to work out? I just have a good feeling about it, and I'll tell you what I mean right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the offseason doesn't exist for the Everydayer Club. Join the group chat to talk Big Blue year-round and get every episode of the show ad-free. Head on over to LockedOnNYGiants.supercast.com or hit the link in the show notes for more information or to join. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And should the Giants trade Dexter Lawrence? Folks, I would be very surprised if the Giants move him. If they're going to move him, it's going to be before the draft, obviously. Has to be. I don't know that the Giants are going to get what they might be looking to get for Dexter Lawrence. If they're looking for a Quinnen Williams type of deal, I don't know that they get that. Okay, so that being said, the two sides are going to have to come to some sort of mutual common ground for this relationship to continue. So what is that going to look like? All right. So one of the things I said on last week's show when I did the mini show on Dexter Lawrence's contract, the Giants have an opportunity to extend Dexter and lower his 2026 cap hit. He's got a $26.958 million cap hit in 2026. $18.5 million of that is his base salary. So why not convert some of that to a signing bonus? Give Dexter a little bit more money, spread it out, put a couple avoidable years in there if you need to in order to thin out the bonus and just call it a day and guarantees, at least 50% of that new money that's coming in. I think that gets it done. It also helps the Giants with their cap. It clears up space, and it doesn't put a king-size hole in a defensive line unit, which already has a lot of question marks. I just don't see the value in trading Dexter Lawrence. I don't think it makes sense. All right. You're going to make the team worse. People talk all the time about trade, trade, trade. You better have a backup plan if you're going to trade that guy. All right. Who's the backup for Dexter Lawrence right now? They added Sam Roberts. Okay. Sam Roberts can play, I think, nose tackle. But is he the best option? And how much of a drop off is there going to be? You might say, well, what about the draft? Is there anybody in the draft right now that we can sit here and say, yeah, this guy is on par with Dexter Lawrence, even after Dexter's down year last year? Don't think so. If you're John Harbaugh and you're telling people that this team is going to be ready to compete, that you expect this team to be in the playoffs, you need Dexter Lawrence on your team. So that being said, you're not going to break open the bank for Dexter, but certainly you can look to get him back into the top 10 highest paid interior defensive linemen. People say, well, Jordan Davis of the Eagles, who's like tied for second highest APY amongst defensive linemen, do a deal similar to that. Jordan Davis, I think, has a little bit higher credentials in terms of postseason honors, but statistically speaking, Dexter's right up there with him. So I'm not saying, make Dexter like the top three highest, put him in the top three of the highest paid defensive linemen, but certainly get him up there towards the top 5. Because I got to think that Dexter, who's had almost 5,000 snaps, regular season snaps on the defensive side of the ball, he's going to start to slow down at some point. Father Time is undefeated. But that being said, I don't think he's there yet. And if you can give him another, 2-3 years, even if you, like I said, you tack on some voidable years, this might be a good time to do that. The Giants, from what we can tell, playing hardball though. They figure, you know what? You're under contract. Either play for us or you sit. And if you sit, you're going to forfeit a year of an accrued season. It's going to be an interesting stalemate, but I think my gut feeling right now is at the end of the day, the two sides will work it out, because this just reminds me a lot of what the Giants and Darius Slayton went through. Exact same scenario. Now, granted, Darius Slayton, we're not talking the same level as Dexter Lawrence, interestingly, both from the same draft class. But if you remember, Darius Slayton sat out an entire offseason, and it was only when the Giants adjusted his contract did he come in and all was right with the world again. I think that's what's going to happen with the Giants. As tempting as it would be to trade Dexter, I don't know that the Giants are going to get what they're looking for, which is a rich haul in return from him. And even if they do, is there anybody in the draft that can give them the type of impact? I don't know that there is. I don't think there is. I think the Giants, if you want to compete and you want to win, you keep Dexter Lawrence, plain and simple. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments below if you are watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening on our audio platforms. Drop a letter. I'd be curious to hear what you guys and gals think. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. Thank you again for tuning in. Just as a reminder, on Tuesday, we have the Giants Squad Show. It is coming to you at 4 p.m. Eastern, the live stream. It'll be myself, Mark Collins, and Brandon Olson. All right, Jay Berman will not be with us this week. So we will be doing all things Giants. You have the Giants coaches that are going to be speaking on Tuesday, so we'll have a wrap-up of that. We've got draft talk coming up. We'll probably talk a little bit more about Dexter as more information comes out. A lot more coming up here on the Locked On Giants channel. Hope you will check that out. So until then, everybody, have a great one.